Welcome, viewers, one and all. I join you to come on a journey with me today to search for the 2026 version of Chris Olave in drafts. Now, I posted this article on Twitter, thread, whatever you want to call it. 4 candidates today that we're going to talk about that are going in the range Olave was going last year. Really like rounds 5 through 8, 5 through 7, 6, 7. Type of range, okay? That's what we're looking for. A guy who can jump from, wide receiver 30, 31, all the way into the top 5 and finish where Chris Olave did. Where is he on my board right now? There he is, last year, okay? And guys, for those of you who are not tracking, Chris Olave, wide receiver 6 last year. Really, if we pull up the game log and we look at just games Tyler Shook was the QB, fellas, we've got a top 5 wide receiver here, if not better. Tyler Shook, 70% of snaps, and there you have it, 18.8 points per game, 9.1 targets per game, comes right in at wide receiver 5. And we are searching for a player who has this type of ceiling, was drafted, this guy, around wide receiver 30 last year for a bunch of different reasons, okay? Maybe some of it is health related, right? But when you really look into it, how did Chris Olave do this, okay? He saw career highs in motion targets, first read targets, red zone targets, and touchdowns. Okay, so more unique type of utilization. He already had, which for one of our candidates today is very interesting, he already had success on deep targets. So a nice air yard share, decent deep target rate, and success on those plays. Consistency, though, right? Raising the floor, staying healthy. Sure, it's one of the factors. Raising the target floor, easy wins, motion targets, first read targets, red zone targets, easier touchdowns, easier points is how this was done. Okay. So what we're looking for today is 4 wide receivers who, hey, maybe they're flashing on some of the hard stuff. And if the easier stuff, which is easier to come by, just increases a little bit, we could have some really good wide receivers here. Here are the advanced stats for Olave in his 4 seasons in the league. Obviously, the best season here is up top, is last year. Not exactly sure which years these other ones are, whether they're his first, second, or third season, but his 4th year is at the top here. And yeah, career high, 9 touchdowns. Career high in first read proxy. So first read target share, right? 29.4. The A dot, as you can see, actually kind of went down. Speaks to some of those easier targets. Motion target, guys, career high 59.6. 2 of his other years, he had 22% and 10%. One of the other years was actually 54.6%, but only 1 touchdown. I have to imagine he didn't play many games that year. Target share didn't increase that much, right? We're not looking for anything crazy in that department, okay? Just a little bit, maybe 1 or 2 per game where, hey, it's a motion target, it's a first read target, it's a red zone target. You get 1 or 2 of those a game, and these 4 players that I've identified can really start to make some noise. Okay, first one is Christian Watson. And I want to just start by saying we are not necessarily looking, right, for players who have a very similar play style to Olave. It's not really what I'm going for. I'm going for ADP and fantasy ceiling / fantasy finish, okay? So one of the other guys we'll mention, he plays nothing like Chris Olave. In fact, all 4 of these guys, they're not very similar play styles. It's kind of like comparing, a Rashee Rice to a T. Higgins, if you will. Like, they're just not the same play styles. But I want to be looking at fantasy outcome. And what I have here for the first player, Christian Watson, wide receiver 29. Okay, I absolutely believe 17 games, he has top 5 ceiling, 100%. Okay, we have seen fantasy football greatness from Christian Watson. This is last year. This is the data from last year per Dynasty. Fantasy points per target, first among all wide receivers. But look at that consistency metric. Not very good. On par, okay, with guys like Quentin Johnston or T. Higgins, who not really the most consistent week to week in terms of the floor. Yards per route run, 2.51. It's a decent number, okay? Luther Burden, 2.71. George Pickens, 2.35. Of course, you have Puka and JSN on this list, and they are just dominating that, but that's a decent number, 2.51 yards per route run. And now let's take a look at the 2 important stats on the right. Target share, 19.2%. Motion targets, 45.2%. Both of those are low. You lose Romeo Doubs. You lose Dontavian Wicks. I have to imagine the target share jumps. I think we're going to be approaching 25%. And if he can just get a couple more motion targets or red zone targets as opposed to these deep bombs, right, that he's very good at catching and scoring on, we're going to really see a nice floor for the first time really in his career for Christian Watson, is my opinion. And I think it's going to happen. It's tough to bet on, right? I think he's in year 4 or 5. It's tough to bet on, but I do think it's going to happen. I mean, these fantasy points per target, guys, 2.4 is unheard of. More than JSN, more than Alec Pierce, who catches a touchdown on every catch. Higgins, Nakua, J-Mo, George Pickens, Burden, like, it's pretty good. And I really like that. Fantasy points per target, if you increase targets in a simple math equation, what are you left with? A lot more fantasy points, right? Fantasy points over targets times targets. Cross that out. Cross out that little denominator with the numerator of targets. You're left with fantasy points. You circle it and you move on to the next question. I'm interested in that, okay? Like I said, Doubs and Wicks gone. More targets. True wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. The most talented wide receiver in Green Bay, in my opinion. I think Golden's a really good player, honestly. In terms of NFL talent, it kind of remains to be seen. Watson, on the other hand, has really flashed here, especially at the end of last year. If we take a look at his game log, when he kind of came back healthy here, came back in week 8, started ramping up. But in these games where we saw let's just do like a 60% of snaps. 60, cool. 60% of snaps, which is not crazy, guys. 14.3 fantasy points on 5.8 targets per game. It's not a lot of targets. Imagine that jumps to 7 or 8, what we're dealing with here. It's a top 5 wide receiver with incredible ceiling. Wide receiver 12 overall, wide receiver 6, wide receiver 6, wide receiver 5. And interestingly enough, no wide receiver 2 games in this span, so it kind of is boom or bust. Fair enough. All right. So yes, Christian Watson is the pick right there to start. Moving on to the next guy, Odunze. And this is where I got some slack because it's like, he's not a similar player to Olave at all. And honestly, neither is Christian Watson. Okay. But when you look at what Rome is actually good at, very good at the deep targets. Okay. Fantasy points per catch, Rome Odunze here, 3.3. This is in all of 2025. And interesting, it's a different metric than fantasy points per target, okay? Fantasy points per catch. So what you have here is typically a lot of guys who rely on touchdowns. You have Devontae Adams leading the league last year, 3.71. You have T. Higgins, 3.59. You have Jameson Williams, 3.35. And you have Rome Odunze, 3.3, just ahead of George Pickens. Those first 4 are the only guys over 3.3 or higher. What you notice about the only 3 players ahead of Adams, Higgins, what you notice about the only 3 players ahead of Odunze, Adams, Higgins, and Williams, Jameson Williams, a lot of touchdowns per catch, a lot of touchdowns. These numbers are carried by their touchdowns. Odunze, after the first 4 weeks of the season, barely scored any touchdowns. He had like 2 or 3, if that. Okay. As such, his consistency rating is low. What are we looking for? Finding the next Chris Olave. More consistency, more red zone targets. When you look at the air yards per target, though, and the yards per play, he's right on pace with Higgins, Williams, right? Air yards per attempt, he's actually higher than all 3 of these guys. Rome was very good at air yards per target. So again, just a couple things closer to the line of scrimmage in this Ben Johnson offense, a little more over the middle. Maybe a fade route here and there. He catches 1 or 2 of those. Okay. Over the course of the entire season, we're now approaching, 8 touchdowns, something like that. 9, dare I say. And you really have some upside here. In year 3, what you're getting is a former first-round wide receiver, okay, with an elite coach, in an elite offense, with an elite offensive line, and dare I say, an elite quarterback. The Bears offense last year, 9th overall in points per game, 9th overall yards per play. And he's already dominating deep, just like Olave was. And really going right in that same range. Next to Watson here. Directly next to him, 62nd overall, wide receiver 28. And this doesn't mean I don't like Luther Burden or Loveland. Love all 3 of these guys. And I really like Caleb Williams. All right, let's move on. Number 3, Marvin Harrison, okay? Guys, we have a 4-game sample size last year, okay? And this gets lost, and I talk about this like once a week on the show. If we go to the game log and we add a filter of Michael Wilson here, let's say Michael Wilson was playing, 50, 60, let's just do 60% of snaps to start. And we add teammate Brissett, Okay, filter that. What we have now is a 9-game sample size, but Marvin was injured for a handful of these games. So let's just bump his snaps up to 60%. Okay, we'll lock those in. And I think we need to raise, what's it called? Wilson's snap percentage. Hold on. Give me one sec, fellas. Teammate snap percentage, Wilson. Always struggle to find this one because Wilson would like play snaps but not be involved. And now we're getting there. Okay, so when you have Wilson at 70% of snaps, meaning he's actually fully involved, okay, those are our filters. Brissett is active. You can see in the top left. Marvin himself is at 60% plus snaps, which really isn't even fully involved. He actually left week 15, 61% of snaps. He was injured, okay, but we'll count it. And Michael Wilson was 70% plus snaps, meaning fully active, right? We have a 4-game sample size, approaching 9 targets per game, 14.4 fantasy points per game. Pretty solid. High-end wide receiver too. And this gets lost, right? And this is even including this game here sandwiched between 2 DNPs where he scored 12.9 points on 61% of snaps. These are very good wide receiver 2 numbers. Guys, if you get 9+ targets per game, okay, mind you, he averaged 8 in that span. Let's open this up and look at the NFL rates. Of every wide receiver since 2009 with 9+ targets per game, how often did he finish top 12 in PPR scoring? 69% of the time. Nice. What if we say games played and 9+ targets and games played? 10+ games played, 72% of the time. How about 14 games played with 9+ targets per game? 79% of the time, you're a top 12 wide receiver. How about if we change this to, let's just do 8 targets per game, right? 8.5. He averaged 8.8 in that sample size. 8.5 targets per game, 14 games played. 69% of the time, you are a fantasy football wide receiver 1. All right. Now let's do a full season, 16 games played. 78% of the time, you are a fantasy football wide receiver 1. 8.5 targets per game. I'll be tweeting this later. A reminder, Marvin averaged 8.8 targets per game in that span. Okay. 7.4 goal line fantasy points per target, tied with AJB for the NFL best. So we have a little bit of a different situation where Marvin already excels at these things, right? Oh, I had the graphic right here. I didn't even have to go search it. Marvin already excels at some of the easy stuff, like those goal line targets, where he could get a bit better. And I'm sure the metrics would support this, is down the field, right? And hauling in those deep targets like Olave did before he broke out. But I think it's encouraging. I like the range he's going in. I'm fine with drafting him as a flex. And let's move on to our final candidate. And guys, this might have already happened, fellas. Yeah, Parker Washington here. Guys, yeah. This Parker Washington guy, yeah, he might be next. If we look at his game log from last year, mind you, the end of this, right? This is really what matters because this is when Lawrence was cooking. All right, weeks, let's just do 16 to 22. It's his final 4 games played, the most recent 4 games we've seen of Parker Washington. 22.3 fantasy points per game, guys. That is a sick joke on 10.3 targets per game, 114 yards, 0.8 receiving touchdowns per game, 22.3 points. The only guy better over the course of the entire season, right, if you were to extend that, is Puka Nacua last year. So this one might have already happened. What is fun to see is that his first read target was only 27.6 in that span. And when you compare him right to the elite guys like JSN, Puka, and yes, Amon-Ra St. Brown, these type of players, it's way lower than them. So genuinely, if Lawrence bumps that up to like 30% first read proxy for Washington, you could absolutely have a top 5 wide receiver here. Doesn't mean I don't love Brian Thomas. He's going here at the end of the 6th. I like him a lot. Guys, those are the 4 candidates that I think could break out, kind of become the next Chris Olave here. Parker Washington, Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze, Christian Watson. Guys, obviously I answer every single question you might have for fantasy. We can even craft an entire custom draft strategy together in the Discord. My rankings are there. Join up, link in bio. I think there's some 30% codes, I think is the deal I had going, still remaining for the Discord, guys. Enjoy. Peace.